Hi there, Randy Green here. In the course Psyche as Energy, I started out with making 5 videos talking about a template reading and also hinting or alluding to some of the other template readings I have chosen to exemplify in the book Understanding the Old Stellar Souls. And I also mentioned that it would not really be possible for me to take an example and then work through it, because then technically by looking at it, the law of participation, I would activate the template. And I took the one I exemplified in the first course. I could use that one because that's one of the ones that kind of, to use that expression, has been taken out of commission. Now, what I want to speculate, because this is just at the stage of questioning and speculation. It has some truth to it, and there are importance in it, but it's a process. And this is where, when we talk about the psyche as processes, because there are multiple processes, it is important to understand the whole dynamic of changing thought forms and changing energies into creating new perceptions of reality, from where we can continue our developmental journey, let's put it that way, all depending on, again, what the goal is and what our mission is and what we want to do with the work that we are doing. But for me, let's put it that way, in the simplest way, my process is, aside from what the fuck am I doing here, because I know I'm not supposed to be here, is also to understand the reality. It's like there's portions of me that ask questions to everything and needs to understand. And this is part of how I work. And I think it's part of some of my original potentials, the need to understand and use understanding and knowledge as a driver to move forwards in my progression. I am pretty sure there are other races that are using other drivers that are being forced in their progression in a positive way, using other things that for them are the qualifying signature of their, let's call it, monadic structure, or the original highest trinity of consciousness and energy and vital force, from where we generate different forms of existences, doing our elevation cycles with that specific signature, as in that's something that is driving us through the different systems, and that is kind of determining how we are acting in the different systems. But this is not where I want to go. I just want to put as in, why do I keep asking the questions? And this is also to be understood that your processes and what you need to master is in alignment with your highest trinity or monadic, because the monad is a trinity of consciousness units and energy units and vital force or life force. That is your upper triangle, and that one is what we call a monad, because technically when it works correctly between these 3 different items of this what we're developing here in these rounds and these cycles, technically more correctly, we are taking energy from the previous cycles of the oversoul or the source cycles, and we are imbuing it with consciousness in these cycles. And once they are combined and they work correctly together, they create what we understand as life force. And life force is what generates life. And that is important to understand, because you can have energy and consciousness that are working together, but they don't hold vital force as we understand it, as such as the Greys, for instance. They definitely have a type of consciousness and they are built out of energy, but they don't hold vital force. They don't hold the the fountain of eternity, not the fountain of youth, but the fountain of eternity. And to be able to continue as an eternal being, so to speak, you need vital force and the understanding of how continuously generating vital force. So this is, I know I haven't talked about that in my previous material, but that is because we are beginning to do the transition into how reality looks now, and this is where it gets quite interesting. It has always kind of, the vital force has kind of been part of our system as well, and I'm pretty sure that we are already working on it in the Pillar Project as well. But for me, it was something that were not really clear to me. It was more the dynamics of transforming energy that had first priority in my awakening process, because that was where I was learning to master who and what I was, and how my consciousness was interacting with this physical form, and how I were to control that, which made me focus on the personality structure and then focus on the energies I was composed of and the fields, which I've talked about so far. And here, while I'm getting to this point, after having worked my way through the Bailey material one more time and been made observant of the etheric energy, which is kind of what we call the holographic code system that is behind everything. And I've worked with the code system because that is what codes the energy fields and codes the consciousness units, and put them together. But and as these different fields work together, as I talk about in the whole integration class 6, and they use the different code fields or the etheric fields, then they begin to create together with the transformed energies and the embedded consciousness into this physical form, not the one we have, but technically the fields behind. Then it begins to generate what we understand as vital force. And if you ask me, what are the races that are here, what are they actually after? I think they are after that vital force, thinking that if they transform their energy systems using our type of composition, then they will generate this vital force. Now, you ask me as in kind of, okay, is this something before the timeline event or after the timeline event? I don't know yet, but I might suspect it was prior to the timeline event, because that would make sense to me, that that's part of the overcycles, that's what will, if you ask me, what will continue after energy and consciousness of this cycle has completed their developmental cycles and compositions and complexities using the code systems, what will be the foundation of the next one? And that will be that trinity I'm here talking about. Then we will literally work in the next overcycles, we will work with vital force as one of the components of a continued range of existences where we have both vital force and consciousness and energy, from where complete new life forms might be able to take place. And I know it is highly influenced by the Bailey material. And this is where I want to go in this with as processes. We are working like scientists, we are working with ideas, and we are working with theories, and we're using these as containers to understand who and what we are and what we're doing here, and how we are to process these different forms of information to get what we need to understand things. And when I say understand, it's not a linear process of going from A to B to C. This is where you get the glimpses of truth, where you feel everything, the puzzle falls into place. The pieces are all fitted together nicely, and then it unravels itself, and whatever you were working with will then show its light, so to speak, and then it will disperse, and you will literally forget that level of information, and then it will become part of your complexity system, so to speak, which makes your as the Bailey material is saying it in this physical form, it makes your etheric field develop itself from being composed of nades or energy cords in a kind of grid structure, will become what we understand as a light body. And not until that light body, you know this from all the New Age stuff, has been generated, transforming the four vital or the four etheric fields into vital force, will this physical form have achieved what it was supposed to achieve within this system. With that understanding, then we can say, well, that was probably part of the Pillar Project. That was probably some sort of understanding. I'm not sure if it's before or after the timeline event. There are things about the dynamics that comes before the timeline event, and then the idea of the light body as the one that would counteract the infection after the timeline event, and why the whole Pillar Project, including this solar system, was transformed as it was to become this huge workstation or this huge facility where different races were trying to undo the effects of the timeline event. And this is kind of how I see our solar system. And that is also why I strongly believe so. I'm not saying this is the truth, but I've got glimpses of that this is why the different planets are now emptied out. The ones that mastered the light body structure and by that burned off all infectious genetics, they moved on and left behind the shell of their planet within this lower level type of structure, which we call our solar system. The ones that failed, their planets either exploded, as we know of Maldak, or they become or had become these empty shells of absolutely no life, because the races there literally succumbed to the infection. I think Pluto is one of these planets that succumbed to the infection. And then it was just made into a wasteland, similar to the moon. Okay, so this is kind of where we have, I think we are after the timeline event. So we are kind of having this understanding that the races in our quadrant, which looked very different at the time, everything was changed after the timeline event. And this cannot be explained. These are some of the things that you will understand eventually if you've got glimpses or get glimpses of it from your own template structure. The process was that the whole thing was, how do we undo this? And I'm not going to go into long details with all of this. Let's just say go some 20,000 years back, where we kind of, when we look at our planet, which is one of the last planets of this experiment that were engineered and developed to undo the effects of the timeline event. And some of the planets succeeded and moved on. Others failed and became part of a belt of what we kind of, technically it's around our solar system. But again, when we talk about these things, you can't really use what science is handing over to you of information. And this is, I want to touch ground with that one as well. Because what we are seeing and what we can see, even if we travel into space and we look at our planet, we are still perceiving our planet within the limitations of our physical sight. That means that the rods and the cones of the eye, which are only capable of detecting certain frequencies and certain spectrums of light, which are technically the same. But when I say frequencies, I mean color spectrum. And when I say light, I mean light and darkness. And this is what the rods and the cones of your eye, or the cells in your eyes, are made for. And the interpreting system of these different forms of light and color is the visual cortex at the back of your head, which has different layers. The raw interpretation of colors and light and darkness, and then what we have developed as this is the interpretation of what we are seeing, which is controlled by not only technology that are controlling our brains, the prohibiting technologies, remember, but also by induction, as in kind of saying the same thing over and over and over again until our brain literally takes this induction of information and introspect it, so to speak, and we begin to believe what we see is in concordance with what science tells us and what the school books have told us, etc., etc. So this is how we are being conditioned to perceive reality in a specific way. I touched ground with this many times over the range of my material, and this is also important when we talk about the planet. And I would recommend you go into Google Earth on the internet. You go on the web and you use Google Earth, and then you literally look at our planet as they have pieced it together, taking different photographs from the satellites and make it a nice round planet where you're kind of seeing the inhabited areas, and then you see the enormous amount of water that our planet technically consists of. And what I want to point you in the direction of, aside from the fact that this is a part of reality, this is what we can see of reality, this is what we are conditioned to see of reality, this is what our eyes allows us to see of reality. And I hope you understand this, that this means that what science is seeing is actually there, but they're only seeing, let's say, 30% of reality. Okay, so you kind of get that. That's where they know there are, as I talked about, dark matter, which is kind of energy that holds a sort of gravity, and then dark energy, which is energy or type of light without any gravity function in it. It's got no retraction dynamics to it. So, but they don't really know what it is yet, other than they are beginning to see that our universe is kind of built up upon a web structure. And these are the holographic grids. So they will get there at some point as these old prohibiting technologies are dismantling, and whoever is left on our planet controlling it, I'll get to that one later, they will allow certain humans to begin to understand some sort of bigger picture of what our reality actually is. But back to Google Earth. Go in and download or get it. You can do it on the web without downloading it on your computer, and then look at our planet. Scroll a little bit, turn it around upside down. You could do very funny things with the planet there. You can make it to go roll around in all directions, which is kind of funny. Suddenly you can put Australia in the northern hemisphere, and this is part of some of the profound questions that we can struggle with. And I know science think they have found the explanations, but these explanations are built over, if you go to the whole Perspectives YouTube channel, I got classes of astronomy there. It's from 2010, it doesn't matter, but it's kind of, he there explains it very nicely how science have come to the understanding of how our Earth is moving around and the sun is moving around, and how these dynamics fit together over a very long period of time of different scientists that have done observations and tried to piece together some kind of theory that matched these observations. So some of them were more outlandish, and some of them, where we are now, is kind of the most reasonable explanation from what we are seeing. And this is also important to understand that concept, that since we are, even though you go out into space, you will still be part of the dynamics around our planet and in our solar system, gravity and onward and so forth, and the whole kind of, there is this specific, you can kind of call it like a gyroscope. It's kind of, wherever you are, you will be upside down, and you will always be the center of the universe. And this is some of the really puzzling things that I think that they are have not really put into the understanding of the dynamics of planets and our solar system and our position in it, including they are also using Einstein's relativity theories that are also built from Newton and that long line of thinkers before him. So that's what they're working with, and from that set of theories have they determined that it works this way. But it's still observation. It's not really, you can't really step out of the picture and look at it from the outside. Even though you're up in your spacecraft and looking down, you're still part of the fields that are around the planet, and you're still limited by the rod and cones of your eyes and what you have of interpretation system. If you technically play with the idea of a human that were extremely advanced and had an advanced brain capacity, going out into space, he or she might actually see something completely else. But if the technology were still as what we could take photographs with, including the satellites that are up there that are taking these photographs and whatever, they are also based upon a simplified type of technology that are mimicking the spectrum that we can see with our eyes. So therefore, it is still limited what is being taken in these photographs and put together into Google Earth. I want to point you in the direction of, remember when we got to the more advanced type of cameras and the iPhones that were building more on what we would call pixels and a different type of technology. And suddenly we all saw orbs until it was kind of discovered that, oh yeah, these was just dust particles, and the field of energy that were around most of these dust particles. And it was kind of an optic illusion made by the camera. But that showed us that we could see things that we were not observant of prior to that. Suddenly we could capture it on our camera, including when they developed infrared sight in cameras to be able to see infrared, and all of these kind of things. It's just a matter of technology expanding, and then suddenly the photographs we might get from space might look quite different sometime in the future. So with these understandings and with this background information, you hereby understand that what you're seeing is just where we are in our perception history. Let us put it that way. But it will still serve the process that I am here initiating. Because the process is, you go into Google Earth and you look at our planet and you move it around. So you because whenever you're looking at maps of Earth, you're only seeing the habitat or the zones that are inhabited. We are rarely seeing the Pacific Ocean, and that is, whether it's half of the planet or it's just a quarter of the planet, it doesn't matter. But it's kind of on the backside of what we are never really seeing, similar to the backside of the moon that we are never seeing either, even because the moon is stationary. It's not rotating anymore. So therefore always one front towards the sun, and the dark side of the moon that's always turned away from the sun. So we are having a little bit of the same dynamics on our planet, because we have a front where we are living, so to speak, and then there is a back that is just ocean. And if you look at Google Earth, you will see that there are this ridge going from Australia and New Zealand. New Zealand is technically on the border of this ridge, and it goes up, and of course it touches Japan, and it touches Russia, and it touches the outskirts of Russia, and it touches the whole North America, Canada, North America, and down into Brazil. So that whole section there, they only have few little islands there, and the ones that are living on these islands are not the descendants of any original human race. Just to put it that they are placed there similar to the Aboriginals and similar to the original people on New Zealand and the indigenous people on the different places in the habitals or the habitat, the zones of. I have a specific word in my brain which I can't really pronounce correctly, so this is a little bit annoying. But I'll get to why I'm calling it the habitual or the habitat. Technically, we're saying the inhabited areas. That's where my brain is kind of going a little bit backwards there. So So this is where we kind of, when we say this is not about the human races as we understand them, because they were re-engineered 20,000 years ago. So even though we are having, you can say, well, there are evidence of original, which are the ancestors of the aboriginals that dates perhaps 250,000 years back, or other races that were earlier on within the habitat, within what we call Earth, the Earth mass on our planet, and not the water areas. So I'm here saying two things to you. One side of the Earth is having a surface where humans can live. That's a habitat. And on the backside, we're having water. That's the Pacific, the North and South Pacific Ocean. Okay, so this is kind of how our planet is divided. And then, of course, you have the northern hemisphere, the southern hemisphere, the eastern and the western hemisphere. But this is and the meridian of the planet and equator. So these are just kind of dividing up our planet, whether or not these are actual things that are part of our planet of the grid, what do you call it, longitude and latitude. That was the way. Or it's something that sailors invented, so they compared to the stars and the ocean and north and south and wherever they were. That I have not investigated further. I can't say, well, if that kind of we know around equator there are a specific band of energy that kind of drives certain weather patterns and weather systems. So there are flows of energy that moves around our planet that are in concordance with our magnetic field, and the latitude and longitude could be part of the setup of the magnetic field. So which is very, that's probably what it is. So you can kind of figure out if that goes well, that goes as well. But with that said, not going into the scientific things that we can measure with our not so developed instruments and technologies, let us look at this idea that you have the Pacific Ocean, which is in itself an enormous tectonic plate. You can see the ridge all the way around, and it's like a whole reality on its own. It's the deep ocean. There is not cities buried down there. If you dive deep enough, you'll not see suddenly a city that is buried down there. There might be, as we see closer to the inhabitable zones that are on our planet. I know I'm not saying it correctly, but just go along with it. That are, as we see it, for instance, in Egypt, there was a port at the end of the delta or the Nile, and there was a huge city there which kind of were flooded and are now underwater, and we're seeing that in many portions and on our planet. And you can also see, if you look at New Zealand, and you can see that it's on top of a landmass that were above the ocean at some point. So this is quite the landmass on our planet is rising and falling, all depending on the tectonic plates. But we had the huge ice age going on, and there were very few inhabitable zones on our planet. And that was the southern hemisphere. The northern hemisphere were covered in ice. And there was a reason why it was covered in ice. And this has something to do with when we talk about the end cycles and why the southern hemisphere is now burning out, so to speak. There's a lot of desert. There are not many viable grids left, but that's literally because these grids were already they are emptied out, because they were there where we have some of the oldest life forms on the planet, so to speak, and they are part of some of the very, very early attempts to undo the infection. And what I'm here saying is that you need to understand that the Neanderthals and the very primal humans that were in the habitable zones around 250,000 years ago, these were some of the original human races that succumbed to the infections and regressed and became these ape-like primitive humans. So it's not the origin of humanity that goes that direction. That is kind of the end of a prior type of civilization which succumbed to the infection. Now, when you look at the planet with these two different zones of the Pacific Ocean, the Pacific Ocean is the ocean and it doesn't have a landmass because it is technically there. You have the original workstation that belonged to the Pillar Project. It is not within our reality per se. It is within the scope of energies of the original construction of our planet. That's why it's in the ocean. It is not, you cannot dive down and find it. It's not in the fourth dimension. There are fourth dimensional races there as well, which is why we're seeing some of the crafts. But the cities that are there they're not even floating in the sky. There are aerial cities there, but it's not anything you can see with your normal perception range. You have to see it etherically, and this is what the Bailey material also say, that Shambhala, that big city, even though it's in the Gobi Desert and whatever, I don't really believe it's there. It's always been speculated where it actually was, and these ideas are some of the things that they say put into the books, but the question is it actually there, or is Bailey just repeating what Blavatsky actually put out of information, and is this information disinformation? But when you look at the Pacific Ocean, and at some point I would love to go out there on a boat and then just see what I could see and sense what I could sense. But I don't have to, because this is anyways part of density energies. So we're having half of our planet is technically still within the original construction setting. But who lives there are part of the original true humans that sold off the other side of the planet, which were the experimentarium, if you want to put that. That was the habitat. That was that zone of our planet that were altered to undo the infection. That was when the true humans of our planet began to show signs of the infection, they were swapped to the other side of the planet, which are the land masses, where they would get this physical form. It's this early version, not the re-engineered form we have now, but the very early version of it. And it was not a primate, and it was not a Neanderthal, it was not a Cro-Magnon or anything like that. These are experimental bodies. Some of them, they surfaced and they couldn't transform the energies. Others were regressed civilizations, so to speak, of the original true humans. These were some of the things that were going on the landmass we now see as our inhabited zones where we live and now have our cities and what we call countries and all of these kind of things. In the beginning, it was one huge landmass, and that was why it's called the habitat. That is where they were driving these different experiments, including trying to see if they could undo some of the regression dynamics of the reptilian genetics, the dinosaurs, creating huge creatures instead of smaller creatures, figuring out that did not work, and then erased it all with a sea of fire. This is what a meteor, if you want to put it that way, or it was perhaps of a fluke or an accident that a meteor actually came in from the Maldakian system, the asteroid belt, and took out the habitat and swapped it around and began to divide the big landmass. I don't know if it was deliberate or it was happening by accident, because the timeline event, of course, made our solar system unstable, especially after Maldak exploded. That changed the natural setting. You have this gap in the rings. It's kind of gravitational gap. It's still upheld by the grid structure, but the planet that's supposed to be there and is supposed to have a mass that keeps things in check are not there anymore. And this is one of the reasons why the Jupiter system was changed from being a sun with its own planets around and then became the counterweight, because if you look at Jupiter, it is more or less composed of the same materials as our sun, but it holds more or less the same gravitational mass as our sun, and Jupiter is the counterweight in our solar system that ensures that we are not all getting sucked into the gravitational pull of the sun. So that's what Jupiter is doing, but it was originally a solar system in its own right, but it was re-engineered to balance out what we could call the inner system after Maldak exploded, and then Neptune and Uranus, which are kind of two other systems, they are more or less what you could call remnants of the original workstations, even though we see them as planets, and again the lack of perception range that we have. So what you're here understanding is, okay, we have the what is left of the original workstation on our planet is in the Pacific Ocean. And when I say it's in the Pacific Ocean, it's not in the Pacific Ocean, but it's in that area where we have the physical, visual representation, holographic overlay system that is there is an ocean. The fact is that we are having density energies there, and that is where we are having, there are entire civilizations living there. That's why when we talk about all the crafts, where they're coming from, and all these kind of things, they come from the Pacific Ocean. They come from the other side of the planet. And then we have the habitat where we are living. And you here are to understand that that was a landmass that was created as an attempt to heal and restore the infection. Whatever was put there was a huge experiment to try and undo the infection, including our physical form. Our physical form was changed when the hijackers came in. And now this is where you are to keep your mind straight in this one, because what happened when the hijackers came here? You have a planet where one half of it is inhabited by the original races, not in a good state, fighting the best they can, keeping themselves secured using repelling systems. And then you had the habitat that were controlled by technology. Literally, they were not interfering with it. It was completely controlled by technology. Trust me, I have seen these original types of technologies. They are extremely intelligent, but they're running the habitat. There are no true human interference in this sector on our planet whatsoever. The moment you were hit by the infection, the original form were put in stasis, your template were pulled out, it was secured, which is what we call sealed off, but it was secured, then was put into a specific type of program. It was linked up to specific type of prohibiting technologies to keep the infection dormant, using liquid light and other stuff, and then put into an organic form and put under specific developmental programs from where the human could work his or her way out of the infection, trying to recreate the original code systems, which would then create the light body. And the moment the light body was engineered and created, the human would shed off the form, leave the habitat, leave the enclosure, and being transferred back into the original density half of our planet with the original true human races. This is extremely important. So the shift, the first part of the transition, is not from our planet and into another planet. It's actually to the backside of our own planet, which is where the original cities of our original civilization, whether there are anyone left there, I don't know. But this, or if it's just aliens that are there now due to the hijacking. So what you also are to understand that what did these original true human races and humanoids do? Because there were both humanoids and true humans. What did they do when the hijackers came? They traded off the habitat. And then the hijacker said, okay, we take the other half of the planet, we will leave your half, we'll take the other half, we'll take over this automated recircling, re-engineering, generating vital force experiment that's going on there. We'll divide it into different countries. We will recreate the organic vessels into different races, which will be under our jurisdiction. We will also in place from other solar systems and other stellar systems and other realities, portions of what we have got of infected beings. We will transfer them from their system to our system, put them into these encapsulation vessels within the habitat as an attempt to redo them and restore them and recreate them, or whatever they wanted to do, or simply just drop them off here because they were too contaminated but had reached some state of eternal existence and needed a place to burn out, and that were easily done in these encapsulating vessels, sealing them completely off, and then attaching what you remember from my older types of information. One of these black cobras that will link up to a dark cube, which would then always make that human make transgression choices, which would lead to a quick deroute and quickly into the older cycles that were highly infected and where the grids were part of what we call the underworld, and they would be sucked down there, and there they would be kept circulating in a illusionary holographic world, which would then eventually deplete them and leave their eternal genetics into evaporation. So this is kind of the world that we are part of. So this is what I'm here introducing, is that on our planet already exist portions that are ready and ripe to connect to the original cycles, and that is in the making. That is part of the new grand cycle, even though the new grand cycle transforms all of the layers of the pillar project and shuts all of this down. Whatever is left of the original true humans and the original solar rishi humanoids on the other side of our planet, this is also where the enhanced humans are living, actually, but they have shifted into different kinds of alliances with other races. So this is where you can ask yourself, are they really true humans anymore? Probably not. Are they really solar rishi humanoids? Probably not. But this is part of when we talk about what I'm introducing here in the whole sciences, is from before we were working with whatever the hijackers that came from other systems linked us up to and used our template in their artificial fourth and their artificial fifth dimension. But since we're now doing the transition and we're doing it on our planet in this physical form, the quest has now become to understand this physical form and to work with the dynamics of the transition within our planetary setting and not within the areas under the hijackers and not within the reconstructed energy systems under the hijackers or whatever artificial realities they have used us within, from where they have harvested and whatever they have been doing with us as they were handed over the habitat from the original races. That was how they avoided being enslaved as well. Something had to be traded off. Something had to be offered for these races that got pulled in. And the races that came in, and I said pulled in, that was because the energies of our planet were hitting a low, which opened up certain gate systems that were very old into these older parallel universes from where the hijackers came. So it had to be done this way. You could say, was it fair? Was it whatever? And if you ask, well, what would be the rationale of the true humans and the solar rishi humanoids? It was kind of, yeah, these humans are already infected, and the races that are coming in are technically in alignment with that type of genetics anyways, because they're also regressed they are not in their full capacity either, and they kind of need to build on something where they can rebuild their structure using some of the rebuilding technologies that were instated into the habitat that are part of our physical form. So it kind of fitted nicely. And then the incomers, they transformed the rest of the prohibiting technologies to suit their agenda and their trade systems. And that is how what was supposed to be a restoration program that was supposed to be part of our planet to heal the original races were then traded off and became a production section instead, under the different races and under contracts of these races, all depending on if they came from this system and were part of the original true humans or original humanoids that got the infection. That is technically what we call the original lineages within the habitat. And then there are the newcomers, or the ones that came in. These are the settlers, these are the overlords, these are all of the ones that swarmed in and like grasshoppers and took over different forms, different human forms, and began to not possess them, but go in some sort of symbiosis with them using the technologically enhanced genetics, altering these and attaching themselves in different ways and forms so that they could exist within our planet in some form and then be anchored here and then had their adjacent artificial fourth and fifth dimensions and what have you. So this is where we are now focusing, again, shifting our perception of who and what we are to understanding, yes, we have been re-engineered to match all of these alien projects, all of these hybrid projects. But as you dismantle the insectoid and the avian and the reptoid and the mammal genetics, which are unnatural to our true human energy system, they are the regressed version of earlier stages of what we went through as well. But when we say, well, the mammals are technically what is left of the original fourth cycle humans, but in a severely regressed state, and mammals and animals on our planet are engineered that way. They are not naturally occurring in any system whatsoever. What is on the life forms within the habitat are all engineered, hybrid, and artificially made for a specific incubation production facility function. You know what I mean? So this is how you are to see all of the life forms around us. And that is why, as we continue with the extinction protocol, which we are in, United Nations tells us we are in the 6th extinction. That is literally because of all of the old programs and all of the races that used to be here, and what was part of the hijacking and what was re-engineered there is unnatural, and therefore it will cease to exist. And as you go through these fields and you clear them out of your energy system and you begin to create the vital force and you begin to create the light field or the light body, and you begin to connect to your original consciousness structure, that is the template, that whatever's left of that one, and you get rid of the emotional field and the mental field, the other side of the planet and this understanding is some of the things that begins to surface. This is where you will actually begin to learn our true human history on this planet, and not just on the Pillar Project, which is what I connected to first, but here in this form on this planet, and what led to your current state and why you are there. And this is where I began in 2013 and 14. And that was the purpose of the book, Understanding the Old Stellar Souls. And that is what I began to see as I worked with the template readings. But the first barrier that I bounced my head against was all of this alien technology, and that's why I was pulled into the artificial fourth and the artificial fifth dimension. And I was dragged into all of their oddities because that was what was the first layer to be cleared out and worked my way through. And as I have worked my way through all of these different layers and dismantled that entire energy system under the hijackers and the entire energy system that were built regarding the whole, what we would call restoration program or regenesis program, which is also called, well, then this layer of history begins to surface. So when we're talking about the activation process and the work with the timeline, for those of you who are doing the timeline work, it's about peeling off layer by layer by layer by layer until you get more and more in contact with your original consciousness structure and begin to understand the dynamics and the processes that has led you to who you are now. And in this end cycle, you will also understand that this is in your awakening process from this oblivious state of having forgotten, because the layers are so intense and there is so much clogging that prevents you from accessing your true core consciousness structure. You will understand that even though you might not be in complete contact with the core of who and what you are, the core flows of your true energy system that creates the vital fields, that generates the light body that will allow you to really connect to your original template structure, and it will fit in like a hand in glove once you get there. That's technically what you need to walk out of here. Not that we will probably achieve that, but that is how it's supposed to work. And as you get to this understanding, you will also see that even though it might be hidden very, very deep in you, if there are still viable genetics of your original structure, it will permeate into all of whatever's around you, whatever settings that are part of your life. It is a vague shadow of some activation mechanism that is trying to get you to heal and restore. And this is part of the original programs that were made for the restoring, that were made for the healing, including the sleep programs. I've just been working my way through these as well. They were part of the restoring of the mental or the brain capacity to clear it out of the infection during dream state. Not that this succeeded whatsoever, and this technology got completely infected, and it, as I said, it runs automatically, so that's not a good thing. Anyways, these are some of the understandings that comes up as you work with this. So having shut this process, it's not done with this, and I'm not going to write it down or anything. This is to be done verbally because it's processed. It's a process, and once it's processed, then it will dismantle and cease to exist, and something else will surface. But the understanding is that the energy system that is proposed in the Bailey material, as it was shown 100 years ago, was the last attempt from some of what we call the White Brotherhood cubes under the Syrian system to try and activate the original restoration program, the original work with the chakra system to try and create the vital force from where the light body could be created, from where, as they call it, the Atma, Buddha, and Mana system, which is what I call the template, would descend into the physical form and then begin to do what it was supposed to do before the hijacking. And you can also figure out that the attempt that was done there was an attempt to try and or avoid the dark forces that were coming in at the same time. And you can also figure out that that led to the aliens in the 50s going in and literally begin to interacting with humans, which they hadn't done in the same manner before, but as an attempt, especially by the Greys, to literally take over the habitat and then create new hybrid programs and new what we could call settings of the original programs and what the hijackers and the settlers did, and onward and so forth. So this is again the shift in history. So that's also why the Bailey material never really came to fruition. These programs were altered in the process and then became the distorted version we know as New Age, which leads to very little. So with that process put in here, it kind of creates some of the background information for this course, the Psyche as processes, because this is where we begin to understand that processes are only possible if they are part of some kind of wholeness. A process has to have dynamics between self and others, between A or B, between some sort of polarity or some sort of opposition. There has to be something to measure up against to really create a dynamic process. A dynamic process is not possible with only the same type of energy. There has to be some kind of adversary, so to speak. There has to be different forms of energies. And it's not about saying, well, it has to be light or darkness and these polarities, but eventually you will go between the more dense type of light and the more subtle type of light, and you will move upwards as you work your way through the different code systems, and you will work with different sets of codes that are doing the same dynamic but technically also are benevolent, just so you understand that oppositions are not necessarily good and evil. That's what it has become. But as you move further into being capable of creating the light body, you will see there are different forms of light, and light becomes more subtle, and lights have different properties. And these are some of the dynamics you will learn to deal with later on when you enter into what we call the density energies. You will begin to see that dynamics and processes there are still happening, but they will not be in a fight or flight modality or a good and evil, but it will be between denser and less dense, subtle and less subtle or more subtle type of energies to build this complexity energy system we're actually trying to build that will allow us to do the transition. So this is, again, if those of you who have not read the 5 Baylor books, I recommend, and that is to repeat it. The Alice A. Baylor books, you are to read Esoteric Psychology 1 and 2, Esoteric Healing, Esoteric Astrology, The Race and the Initiations, and A Teatress on a White Magic. And if you feel for it, read the Teatress on Cosmic Fire as well, but that's a heavy one. It's not necessarily important to do, but it's a good background for the other 5 books. But just putting it out there that is a possibility for you to read as well. And I'm also working my way through the book on glamour. So that is also a good read. Again, I'm reading them in Danish. And the ones that have translated it in Danish were in the 90s. So my books are quite up to date with a lot of terminology. And I can see the English books, they are still as they were written 100 years ago, which makes them a little bit more antiquated in their terminology. And I therefore can't really say if they are as good as the Danish books, but they are definitely worth a read for those of you who want to get some of the addings into what I'm actually saying here, because all of my material would not have come to be if it wasn't because of my very in-depth study of the Baylor material, and I worked with it for a long period of time to really contemplate and understand what was actually being presented in this material. So it is the foundation, if you want to put it this way, of many of my ideas, and that's why I am putting it in here, so you also get this foundation. So with that one said, welcome to this course, The Psyche as Processes. Thank you.